Before we get into tonight's stories, if you enjoy content like this, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. Every week we upload new horror stories, paranormal encounters, and unexplained events that you do not want to miss. Hit the bell icon too, so you get notified every single time we post something new. Now, let's get into it. My grandfather was a man of very few words. He had grown up on the Navajo Nation in northern Arizona and had seen things during his life that he refused to talk about, not because he couldn't remember them, not because he didn't believe they were real, but because, as he told me once when I was very young, some things grow stronger when you give them a name. He passed away when I was 19, left me his truck, his land, and a small wooden box locked with a padlock that had no key. I kept the box on a shelf in my apartment for 2 years before curiosity finally got the better of me. I took a flathead screwdriver to the lock and pried it open one night in January, when the snow was coming down hard outside, and the heat in my building wasn't working properly. It felt like the right kind of night to open something that was never meant to be opened. Inside the box was a folded piece of paper with a single paragraph written on it in my grandfather's handwriting. I won't repeat what it said word for word. What I will tell you is that it was a warning, a description of something he had encountered once while driving home alone along a remote stretch of highway that ran through the reservation. He described the shape of it standing in the road ahead of him. He described the way it moved when his headlights hit it. He described the sound it made when it pressed itself against the driver's side window of his truck and looked in at him through the glass. He had stopped the vehicle, too terrified to drive. He sat there for 40 minutes with his eyes shut and his hands pressed flat over his ears until whatever it was decided to leave him alone. At the bottom of the note, underlined twice in heavy black ink, he had written these exact words: "Do not look for it. Do not speak of it. If it finds you, close your eyes, cover your ears, and wait." I read that note sitting at my kitchen table at about 11 o'clock at night. I folded it back up and put it in the box and put the box back on the shelf. Then I went to bed and told myself to forget about it. At some point in the middle of the night I woke up suddenly. I don't know what time it was. My phone was dead and the clock on the microwave was blinking 12 because the power had apparently gone out and come back on at some point while I slept. The apartment was very quiet, in the specific way that apartments are not usually quiet. That total absence of ambient sound that you don't even notice is normally there until it's gone. I lay there in the dark with the covers pulled up in the strange, entirely irrational certainty that something was standing just outside my bedroom door. Not knocking, not making any sound at all. Just standing there on the other side of it, waiting. I don't know how long I stayed like that without moving. Long enough that my eyes had fully adjusted to the dark, and I could make out the thin line of pale yellow light coming from underneath the bedroom door from the small nightlight I kept plugged into the hallway outlet. I watched that thin yellow strip of light without blinking, and then something blocked it. Whatever was standing outside my door had moved close enough to the base of it that I could see its shadow cutting across that line of light underneath. A wide, low shadow. Too wide to be a person standing normally in the hallway. The shadow shifted slightly. Then a sound came from beyond the door. Not a knock, not a voice. Low, steady clicking sound, rhythmic and patient. Like knuckles being cracked one at a time over and over again without stopping. I remembered what my grandfather had written. Close your eyes, cover your ears, and wait. I pulled the covers up over my head and pressed my palms hard against my ears. I could still feel the clicking sound more than hear it. A deep vibration that moved through the mattress springs and up through the frame of the bed and into my bones. I kept my eyes shut. I kept my ears covered. I don't know how long it lasted because I had no way to track time. At some point I must have fallen asleep from sheer exhaustion because when I woke up, the room was filled with the gray flat light of an overcast morning, and the apartment was silent and still. The bedroom door was standing open. I always sleep with it closed. On the floor just inside the doorway, there were 2 dark handprints pressed into the carpet. Not smudged, not smeared. 2 clean prints, like someone had pressed both palms down deliberately into the pile of the carpet and held them there. Too long in the fingers, too many of them, pointing inward, pointing toward the bed where I had been sleeping. I never went back to that apartment. I didn't even return to collect my things. I called my mother and told her everything that had happened, and she went pale in a way I had never seen on her face before. Not when our father left, not at the funeral, not ever. She told me that her father had told her the same thing once, when she was a teenager, that it had followed the family across generations, that it wasn't looking for anything in particular or trying to take anything from them. It just checked in from time to time, made sure they knew it was still around. She said that as long as you didn't look at it directly and didn't say its name out loud, it would eventually move on and leave you alone for a while. That it fed on acknowledgement, on the act of being seen and recognized by something that understood what it was. I still sleep with the lights on. My new apartment has deadbolts on both doors, and I check them twice before I go to bed every single night. I don't know if that helps. I honestly don't believe it does, but it's something to do. Some small action that makes the night feel slightly more manageable. My grandfather kept his box locked for 50 years. I think now I understand why. I work on a survey crew. We spend most of our time out in rural areas marking property lines, taking measurements, documenting terrain. The work takes us to a lot of remote places that most people never have any reason to visit. Old farmland, stretches of timber, high desert plateaus that go on forever in every direction, without so much as a fence post to break up the landscape. It is quiet work, mostly. You get used to the solitude. You get comfortable with the idea of being a long way from anyone else. Last autumn, we were assigned to a job in a heavily forested area of the Pacific Northwest. The land was privately owned, a large tract of old-growth timber that a development company had purchased and wanted, fully surveyed before deciding what to do with it. There were no roads into the interior of the property. We had to hike in with all of our equipment each morning and hike back out before dark. The trees in there were enormous. Some of them had been growing for centuries. The canopy was so thick in places that almost no light reached the ground, and the air had a cold, closed feeling to it that reminded me of being underground. The first 3 days were completely uneventful, cold, wet, and tedious the way that kind of work usually is. On the 4th day, we were pushing further into the interior than we had gone before, following a creek bed uphill through a section of the densest timber on the property. My partner Marcus was ahead of me by about 30 feet, calling measurements back over his shoulder. He stopped walking without any warning. I almost walked into him because he stopped so abruptly without saying a word. I started to ask what was wrong, and then I saw it too. In the trees directly ahead of us, maybe 60 yards out, something was standing in the shadows and watching us. At first glance, I thought it was a person in a long dark coat who had wandered onto the property. It was upright. It was roughly the right height, but the proportions were wrong in ways that my eyes kept struggling to process correctly. The arms were too long, hanging past the knees in a way that human arms simply do not hang. The head was slightly too large, and it sat on the neck at a sideways angle that made it look permanently tilted, like something listening very carefully to a sound that was just barely within its range of hearing. It was completely still. I don't mean it was standing quietly the way a person stands when they're watching something. I mean it was perfectly, absolutely motionless in a way that felt fundamentally wrong. The way a photograph is still rather than the way any living thing with a heartbeat is still. Marcus said something very quietly. I didn't catch all of it. Something about the proportions being wrong. That the legs didn't bend the right way. As if it heard him speak, the thing tilted its head slowly to the opposite side. Very slowly, deliberately. Then it took one single step toward us. I have worked outdoors my entire adult life, and am not a man who frightens easily. Something about that single step, the absolute deliberateness of it, the way it moved without any of the incidental natural body language that people and animals have when they move, sent a surge of pure animal terror through me that bypassed every rational thought I had and went straight to something older and deeper inside my brain. Marcus and I stepped backward at exactly the same moment without any communication between us. We did not turn around. We did not take our eyes off the thing. We just stepped backward through the shallow creek water 1 foot at a time, keeping our bodies facing it. It took another step toward us, then another. It matched our pace exactly, not closing the distance between us, not allowing us to increase it either, just following at precisely the same speed we retreated, staying 60 yards back, cocking its enormous head back and forth as it watched us move. Marcus made a sound I had never heard from a grown man before, a low, involuntary sound of pure animal fear escaping from somewhere he couldn't control. We backed up like that for what felt like 15 minutes. Every step we took backward, it took a step forward. always the same distance. Always that same awful, patient, deliberate movement. Then we broke out of the tree line into a clearing, and the light changed suddenly, and when I looked back the thing was gone. The edge of the forest was empty. Nothing moved between the trunks. Marcus and I hiked out without speaking a single word to each other. We drove to the nearest town and sat in a diner for a very long time drinking bad coffee. Eventually Marcus said what we had both been thinking, that the way it moved didn't look like something that was learning to walk on two legs and hadn't quite mastered it yet. It looked like something that had been doing it for a very long time and had simply stopped bothering to make it look natural. We finished the survey job by mapping only the outer perimeter. Neither of us went back into the interior. The development company complained. We quit before they could let us go. Marcus moved back east a few months later. I haven't spoken to him since. There are some experiences that bond people together, and some that make it impossible to look at each other afterward because of what you both know. I still think about the way it turned its head when he spoke. My sister and I grew up in a small community on the edge of the Uinta Basin in northeastern Utah. People who know the area will understand immediately what I'm talking about when I say it has a reputation. Locals generally don't discuss it with outsiders. Not because they're trying to protect any kind of secret, more because they've learned that outsiders laugh at them and make them feel foolish for trying to explain something that requires a lifetime of living there to fully understand. I'll tell you what happened to my sister when she was 16. She has given me her permission to share this. She and a friend named Danny decided one evening in late summer to take Danny's family's horses out for a ride before dark. They had done this many times before without any trouble. The route they usually took went east out of town along a dirt road, up through a long ravine, and out onto a high mesa with a wide open view of the entire basin stretching out below. They would ride up to the top, rest the horses, enjoy the view, and come back the same way they went up, 2 hours at the most. A ride they had done easily a dozen times. They didn't come back at 2 hours. My parents were awake and worried at 4 hours. At 5 hours my father drove out along the road looking for them with a flashlight, calling their names into the dark. 6 hours he called the county sheriff. They found both girls just after 2 in the morning, sitting in the middle of the dirt road about half a mile from the base of the trailhead. Both of them were on foot. No horses anywhere. They were sitting cross-legged in the dirt facing each other, holding hands, with their eyes squeezed completely shut. The sheriff's deputy told my father they had been sitting like that motionless when the headlights of the patrol truck found them, and neither one of them would open their eyes until my father got out of his truck and physically placed his hands on my sister's shoulders and said her name several times in a row. When she finally opened her eyes, she burst into tears. It took a very long time to piece the story together from her. What she and Danny had seen on the mesa, she said, was a tall figure standing at the edge of the cliff face, looking out over the basin below with its back toward them. They initially assumed it was a hiker who had come up the other side until the horses suddenly refused to go any further and began to panic. My sister was a strong and experienced rider, and she could not control her horse. It wanted nothing more than to wheel around and run back down the trail as fast as it could go. Then the figure at the edge of the cliff turned around and looked at them. My sister said it was wearing something that looked like an animal skin draped over its back and shoulders, the way you might wear a cape or a blanket. It was very tall, looked at them across the open space of the mesa without moving for a long time. Then it dropped smoothly down to all fours. The horses bolted instantly. Both riders were thrown. The horses ran without stopping and were found back at the barn in town hours later, drenched in sweat, wild-eyed, refusing to be led back into their stalls. The thing came toward my sister and Danny on all fours at a speed she said she could barely comprehend. A fluid, rolling gallop that covered the open ground of the mesa in enormous strides. She and Danny ran, but there was nowhere to go and nothing to hide behind on that flat, open plateau. My sister's legs gave out and she fell hard onto the rock surface. When she looked up from the ground, the thing was standing directly over her. She said she could smell it from that distance, something ancient and organic, like wet, dark earth and old, dried blood. It crouched low over her, and she could see the shape of it silhouetted against the stars above. It stayed there, crouching over her, just looking at her. For what she said felt like a very long time. It did not touch her. It simply crouched there in the dark and looked Danny appeared from somewhere behind it and grabbed my sister's hand and pulled at her and told her to close her eyes and not open them. She didn't know why she said that. It just arrived in her mind fully formed, the way certain instructions come with their own authority, already feeling true before you've had any time to question them. Close your eyes, don't open them, don't look at it. Whatever you hear, don't open your eyes until it leaves. They sat together in the dirt on that mesa, with their eyes shut for hours, holding onto each other's hands, listening to sounds moving around them in the dark, breathing that wasn't theirs, the occasional sound of weight settling onto rock, a low noise that was almost like a voice, almost like language, but not quite either of those things. Close, but not quite. At some point well into the night, the sounds simply stopped. They kept their eyes closed for a long time after that, until they were certain the silence was real. Then they walked down the trail in the dark with their eyes adjusting slowly, holding on to each other without speaking, and sat down in the road to wait for someone to find them. The horses were sold within the year. My sister hasn't ridden since. Danny moved away after high school, and the friendship gradually dissolved. Neither of them ever brought up that night in any conversation with the other. Some experiences are too large to carry into ordinary life without the weight of them crushing everything around them. There are things in that basin that have been there for a very long time, longer than anyone living there now, longer than anyone can comfortably account for. Most people who grow up in that area arrive eventually at the same quiet understanding. Stay on the roads after dark. Don't go up onto the mesa alone. Don't spend too long looking at shapes in the darkness that you cannot immediately explain. And if one of them ever crouches over you in the dark, for the love of everything that matters to you, keep your eyes shut and wait. Those are tonight's stories. If any of them felt a little too close, that's probably because some of what lives out there in the dark is a lot closer than we'd prefer to believe. Hit subscribe before you close out of this video, so you don't miss our next upload. And check out more of our true horror stories right here. Good night.